Here we go. We Afro-take another episode, and it's about the highest paying countries in the continent.
Yes, the job market in Africa. Isn't that exciting?
Yep, let's get to it.
As there is a pressing necessity for job creation in sub-Saharan Africa, we are highlighting the youth demographic's ability to drive economic progress. And we investigate lucrative job markets, the expanding tech industry, and remote work opportunities, while addressing current skills shortages.
So questions raised on this topic are:
what factors influence African nations' economic prosperity and job creation?
how can Africa leverage its demographic dividend for sustainable economic growth?
How is technology impacting job creation and the skill set needed in Africa?
So join us on this episode as we Afro-take the economic pulse of Africa.
Welcome back to Afro-take's Economy Pulse of Africa. I'm Janine, and Nate is my co-host.
Hello, everyone. It's good to be here. And just remember, you can take part in any discussion we have here on Afro-take.
Yeah, by sharing your thoughts in the comment section, subscribing to our podcast, and you can set yourself up for our weekly newsletter if you go on afrotake.com.
All right, let's Afro-take this deep dive. Today, we're tackling something pretty big: Africa's potential to become, like, a global tech powerhouse. Yep. We've got a ton of sources to dig into: articles from the World Economic Forum, CA Global, even a LinkedIn analysis. Oh, and a report from the IMF.
Yeah, it's way more than just tech, though, right? We're going to be looking at all the things shaping Africa's future, the exploding population, the challenges, all the opportunities.
It's all connected.
Yeah.
And the reason you should care, like whether you're into business or tech or just, curious about the world, is that what happens in Africa is going to impact everyone. I got to say, this stat blew my mind. By 2050, 1 in 4 people on Earth will be African.
And a third of the world's youth.
Yeah. Also African.
UN projections. It's a huge demographic shift. Think about it. A younger, more dynamic workforce compared to aging populations in other parts of the world. That's the kind of potential we're talking about.
Nigeria especially stood out to me. The World Economic Forum article mentioned it's on track to pass the U.S. as the 3rd most populous country.
It's not just Nigeria, though. Sub-Saharan Africa as a whole, they're expected to account for over half the world's population growth between now and 2050.
Wow.
Yeah, that means like 90% of the global increase in the working age population will come from that region. This isn't just some regional thing. This is like a global transformation happening right in front of us.
But this is where things get complicated. The IMF report, it points out that to keep up with this population boom, Sub-Saharan Africa needs to create something like 15 million new jobs every single year by 2030.
And that's a massive challenge when you consider that only about 3 million formal wage jobs are created annually. The report, they highlighted Niger as like a really stark example. They need to create 650,000 new jobs every year for the next 30 years just to keep pace.
Those numbers are crazy. It seems like figuring out this jobs challenge is super important, not just for Africa, but for global stability.
For sure. If Africa doesn't create enough jobs, it risks things like social and economic instability. But if it succeeds, the prosperity unlocked could benefit the entire world, right? The stakes are huge.
Absolutely. So what's the solution? A lot of the sources pointed to technology as a key driver of economic growth and maybe an answer to this jobs problem.
Yeah, it's not a silver bullet or anything, but it's a powerful tool. Think fintech, e-commerce, you've got edtech, health tech, agri-tech. The digital economy opens doors in so many sectors. And the interesting thing is, it's not just about like swapping old jobs for new ones. It's about entirely new skill sets emerging.
That LinkedIn analysis was so interesting. It highlighted skills that are in demand, like software development, data science, cybersecurity, AI, even machine learning. They even mentioned specific programming languages: Python, JavaScript, and Swift. It's like we're getting a sneak peek into the future.
It's a rapidly evolving landscape. And on top of that, think about the impact of, the remote work revolution. African tech professionals can now tap into global opportunities without even leaving the continent.
It's like borders are becoming less relevant in the digital age. Someone in Nairobi could be working for a company in New York. That's wild.
One of the sources quoted Rishon Chimboza. He's from the Tony Blair Institute. And he said, AI could boost Africa's GDP by up to $2.9 trillion by 2030. That number alone shows how transformative technology could be for the continent.
So we've established tech is a big deal in Africa. But where are the hotspots? CA Global, they put together a list of the highest paying countries, and it's not just about salary. We're talking about the whole economic climate, cost of living, ease of doing business. Where do we even start?
Well, let's start with Libya. It's one of the richest oil-producing nations in the world, even with, the recent political and economic challenges.
Right.
Oil and gas are a big draw, but opportunities in banking and finance are also strong. And a relatively low cost of living means, your earnings go further.
Of course, you have to balance that with the security situation, which can be a bit unpredictable.
For sure, there's a trade-off there. What about Morocco?
Morocco, yeah.
Morocco is known for its diverse market-oriented economy. It's been attracting foreign investment for years. The government's focus on, creating a favorable business environment is reflected in things like stable economic growth, low inflation.
The CA Global article lists a bunch of hot sectors there. Human resources, manufacturing, business and finance, tourism and hospitality, and banking. That's a really great mix of established and emerging industries. It shows how diverse Morocco's economy is.
Now, shifting gears a bit to Ghana, it has the highest GDP per capita in West Africa.
Really?
Yeah, they're a major player in manufacturing, automotive, ship construction, and they're becoming a hub for exporting digital technology.
There's a vibrant entrepreneurial scene there. But the cost of living, I noticed, is moderately high, something to think about.
Tanzania is another one to watch. Political stability and rapid economic growth have caught the attention of the World Bank. They ranked it as one of the fastest-growing economies in sub-Saharan Africa.
The article mentioned insurance, financial services, and mining and quarrying as lucrative sectors. We're talking lawyers, doctors, CEOs, finance managers, NGO workers, even pilots and oil and gas engineers. A pretty diverse range of talent is needed there.
And much like Ghana, Tanzania has a high cost of living, so it's all about balancing salary and expenses. How about we switch gears again and talk about Mauritius?
Mauritius, that little island nation known for beautiful beaches.
Exactly. But don't let the size fool you. Mauritius has a surprisingly competitive economy. It's a hub for tourism, economic processing zones, and financial services. So if you're looking for a picturesque place to live and work, Mauritius is worth checking out. The money's mainly in finance, manufacturing, business outsourcing, and of course, tourism.
It sounds amazing. But what about those who, prefer a more rugged environment?
The Namibia might be the place. It's one of the world's largest uranium producers, so mining is a big deal there. But it's not all about, digging rocks. Livestock, farming, and fishing are also major industries.
Namibia has a really high cost of living, though. The salaries in sectors like aviation, oil and gas, and mining can be competitive, but, there's definitely a trade-off.
Right. Now, South Africa is a unique case. It's got one of the most developed economies in Africa, but it also faces its own set of challenges.
True. It's still the continent's mining, industrial, and financial hub, but it's got that high cost of living and a complex socio-political landscape.
The highest paid professionals in South Africa tend to be lawyers, IT managers, air traffic controllers, software engineers, architects, and petroleum controllers.
And lastly, we have Zambia, which saw really rapid economic growth in the early 2000s. The top industries there are office administration, banking and finance, healthcare, NGOs, and agriculture.
The interesting thing about Zambia is it has a relatively low cost of living compared to, many other African countries. This makes it pretty attractive for those looking for affordability.
So we've got a really diverse mix of countries here, each with its own strengths and challenges. If you were starting your career, which country would you choose and why?
Ooh, that's a tough one. It really depends on your individual priorities and how much risk you're willing to take. Do you prioritize a high salary, even with a high cost of living? Or are you looking for more political and economic stability?
It's not a one-size-fits-all situation, that's for sure. What stands out to me from all this is that Africa is on the verge of a major transformation, and technology is a huge part of that. But, we can't ignore the challenges. And that brings us to something we touched on earlier, the skills gap.
Yeah, that's a critical issue. The demand for tech skills in Africa is growing faster than the supply, which could, hold back growth.
We talked about upskilling and reskilling, but what does that actually look like on the ground?
Well, the World Economic Forum highlighted some initiatives like the Closing the Skills Gap accelerators in South Africa and Nigeria. These are public-private partnerships specifically designed to tackle this issue.
So governments are recognizing the need to step in, and they're working with the private sector to address this skills gap. It seems like a step in the right direction.
Absolutely. Governments across Africa need to invest in education and training programs that align with the needs of, the digital economy. And building out digital infrastructure is crucial, too, to make all of this possible.
This isn't just about filling job openings, right? It's about empowering people to create their own opportunities. The entrepreneurial spirit in Africa is incredible. How do we harness that?
That's where education comes in. We need to equip people not just with technical skills, but with the ability to think critically, solve problems, and adapt to a constantly changing technological landscape. We're talking about like uniquely human skills that will become even more valuable as automation takes over, those routine tasks.
So it's about preparing people for jobs that don't even exist yet. It's an exciting, but also kind of daunting prospect.
It is, but instead of focusing on the fear of automation, we should be optimistic. We have the opportunity to use technology to uplift humanity, not just replace it.
Now, before we get too carried away with the future, let's go back to that skills gap for a second. It's not just an African problem, right?
You're right. It's a global phenomenon. Technology is changing so rapidly that people everywhere are struggling to keep up. We hear a lot about, automation taking jobs, but not enough about the growing demand for new skills.
And this is where I think Africa has a real advantage. It's got this young, dynamic population that's like eager to learn and adapt. If we can give them the right education and training, they can become global leaders in the industries of the future. It's a pretty powerful vision.
It's not just about economics either. It's about empowering people to create a better future for themselves and their communities.
We've covered a lot so far. Population booms, the rise of the digital economy, high-paying countries, and this critical skills gap. But what's next? What can our listeners do to stay engaged with this, rapidly evolving continent?
I'd encourage everyone to explore the sources we've discussed today, but also go beyond them. Read articles, listen to our other episodes on AfroTake, and follow African tech leaders on social media. Don't just passively consume information, engage with it. Ask questions, challenge assumptions, and share your own insights.
And most importantly, stay curious. Africa is a continent of endless surprises and possibilities. The more you learn, the more you'll realize how much there is to discover.
We've only scratched the surface today. There's so much more to explore, and I hope our listeners will join us on this journey.
Well said.
This is The Economic Pulse of Africa on AfroTake, powered by Brand Blended Media, so stay tuned.
This is AfroTake, the economic pulse of Africa, with Nate and Janine. Let's dive in.
We've covered a lot in this first part of our deep dive into Africa's tech-driven future.
Before we jump into part two, I just want to kind of reiterate one thing from our last segment.
Yeah, go for it.
We were talking about how technology can be a solution to, that jobs challenge in Africa.
Right. The potential for tech to create new opportunities and really boost economic growth.
Exactly. But we got to be mindful of the potential downsides, too. Technology can actually make inequality worse if we're not careful.
That's a really important point. We can't just assume tech will automatically benefit everyone, right? It's about making sure everyone has access to education, infrastructure, and opportunities.
Exactly. If we want to see technology really uplift Africa, we need to make sure everyone can access it, not just a select few.
So it's not just about having the newest gadgets. It's about creating a level playing field where anyone can participate in the digital economy.
Precisely. And that takes a real effort to address those barriers that already exist, whether it's poverty, lack of infrastructure, or, gender inequality.
It's complicated, for sure, but definitely something to keep in mind as we explore, the potential of technology in Africa.
Absolutely. Now, moving on to the next part of our deep dive, I think it's worth looking closer at what kinds of skills will be most valuable in Africa's future workforce.
Okay, so we talked about the tech skills, the coding, the AI, all that. But what else is important?
Well, the World Economic Forum report, it actually pointed out that while young Africans are, getting better educated, high school graduation rates are up a lot, there's still this lack of digital skills needed for things like AI and green technologies.
So just teaching people how to code isn't enough. They need to know how to apply those skills in a world where tech is always changing.
Exactly. And that's where those uniquely human skills are so important. Things like critical thinking, problem solving, creativity, being able to adapt.
Those are the skills that are harder to automate,
Right.
right? Things machines can't replicate.
Exactly. They're going to be essential for navigating a world where, technology is constantly evolving.
It makes me think of that quote, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." I think it was Alvin Toffler who said that.
That's so relevant to what we're talking about. In a world of super fast technological change, being able to learn and adapt is like everything.
So how do we encourage those skills in young people in Africa? How can we get them ready for this future?
Well, education systems need to ditch the rote learning and focus more on, developing those critical thinking and problem-solving abilities.
Right. It's not about memorizing facts anymore. It's about knowing how to use that knowledge in real-world situations.
Exactly. And that requires a more hands-on, experiential approach to learning.
What about the role of mentors and role models? Having people to look up to, people who have been successful in these fields, that could be really inspiring, don't you think?
Absolutely. Mentorship is so important. It gives young people guidance, support, and a sense of what's possible. It shows them, hey, you can achieve your dreams too.
And it's not just about formal mentorship programs, right?
Yeah.
It's about creating a culture where people are willing to share their knowledge and experience.
Yes, and that includes giving young people chances to connect with professionals in different fields, whether it's internships, shadowing programs, or even just networking events.
I feel like there's a huge opportunity to use technology to connect people and make mentorship easier. Imagine a platform where young people in Africa can connect with mentors all over the world who can share their expertise.
That's a fantastic idea. Technology can definitely break down geographical barriers and connect people with, the resources they need.
And it's not just about tech skills. Mentors can also help young people develop those soft skills that are so important for the workplace, like communication, teamwork, and leadership.
Exactly. Those are the skills that will make young Africans stand out, in a competitive job market.
Okay, so we've talked about education, mentorship, soft skills.
Yeah.
What about entrepreneurship? What role does it play in this tech-driven future for Africa?
That's another huge piece of the puzzle. Africa has this incredible entrepreneurial spirit, right? It's a place where people are always coming up with creative ways to overcome challenges.
We see it everywhere, from the street vendors to the tech startups. There's this incredible drive and resilience.
Exactly. And that's what we need to nurture. We need to make it easier for entrepreneurs to succeed.
So what does that look like? What are the key things needed for a thriving entrepreneurial ecosystem?
Well, access to funding is huge. Startups need capital to get going and grow.
But it's not just about throwing money at the problem, right?
Right.
It's about the right support, the mentorship, the networks, the infrastructure.
Absolutely. Startups need more than just money. They need guidance, connections, and an environment where they can experiment and learn from their, mistakes.
What about governments? What can they do to encourage entrepreneurship?
Governments can really help by creating a good business environment. That means things like less red tape, making it easier to start and run a business, and offering tax breaks for startups.
And it also means investing in infrastructure, like high-speed internet and reliable electricity, which are essential for any tech company.
Exactly. And it means supporting education and training programs that give people the skills they need to be successful entrepreneurs.
So it's this multi-pronged approach with governments, the private sector, and individuals all working together.
Absolutely. It's about creating a culture where entrepreneurship is valued and supported.
And I think it's important to highlight the social impact of entrepreneurship. It's not just about money. It's about solving problems and making a positive difference.
Yes, a lot of African entrepreneurs are motivated by wanting to make their communities better. They're creating businesses that address local needs, whether it's access to clean water, healthcare, or education.
That's what I find so inspiring about the African tech scene. It's not just about profit. It's about using technology to really make a difference in people's lives.
Exactly. And that's what makes me optimistic about Africa's future. It's a continent with so much potential, and I believe technology will help unlock it.
I agree. It's an exciting time to be watching what's happening there. So we've talked about the skills gap, uniquely human skills, mentorship, and the power of entrepreneurship. What else should our listeners be thinking about as we consider Africa's tech-driven future?
Well, one thing people often overlook is infrastructure. You can have all the talent and ideas in the world, but without the right infrastructure, it's tough to make things happen.
You mean things like internet access, electricity, transportation?
Exactly. Those are the basic building blocks of a modern economy, and they're often missing in many parts of Africa.
I remember reading that only something like 35% of people in sub-Saharan Africa have access to the internet. That's a huge digital divide.
It is, and it's a major obstacle to economic growth and development. Without reliable internet, it's hard for businesses to operate, for students to learn, and for people to connect with the rest of the world.
So what's being done about it? Are there any programs trying to expand internet access in Africa?
Yes, there are actually a number of initiatives. Governments, NGOs, and private companies are all working on it. whether it's laying fiber optic cables, launching satellites, or building cell towers.
That's good to hear. But it's not just about getting access, is it? It also has to be affordable. Internet needs to be within reach for the average person.
Absolutely. Cost is a major barrier for a lot of people in Africa. Those data plans are often just way too expensive.
So it's a complex problem, no easy answers, but it's something that needs to be fixed if we want Africa to reach its full potential, its tech potential, that is.
Totally agree. Infrastructure is the foundation for everything, and we need to make sure that foundation is strong.
It's like building a house. Can't build a strong house without a solid foundation.
Exactly, and that's what we need to be focusing on in Africa, building that solid foundation of infrastructure that will let the continent thrive in the digital age.
Okay, so infrastructure. What about foreign investment in Africa's tech sector?
Foreign investment is playing a bigger and bigger role. We're seeing a lot more venture capital firms and those big tech companies investing in African startups.
Interesting. What's driving that trend?
Well, for one, Africa is seen as a high-growth market. With a young and growing population, there's a lot of potential for tech companies to do well there.
And it's not just about the domestic market, right? A lot of African tech companies are coming up with solutions that could work globally.
Exactly. We're seeing African startups innovating in things like fintech, healthcare, and agriculture, and their solutions are attracting attention from investors worldwide.
But foreign investment can have its downsides, right? There are worries about exploitation and profits being taken out of the continent.
Yes, it's important to keep those concerns in mind. We have to make sure foreign investment benefits Africa, not just the investors.
So how do we find the right balance? How do we make sure that foreign investment is a good thing for Africa's tech sector?
Well, we have to make sure that African entrepreneurs are involved in the process. They need a voice in shaping investment deals and making sure those deals are fair.
And prioritize investments that create jobs and opportunities for people in Africa.
Exactly. It's not just about bringing in money, it's about building capacity and helping Africans take the lead in the tech sector.
It's about a win-win, where both investors and the African economy benefit.
Precisely. And I think we're starting to see a shift in that direction. People are recognizing that the best way to invest in Africa is to invest in Africans.
That's great to hear. So we've talked infrastructure, foreign investment, and the importance of supporting African entrepreneurs. What about culture? How does African culture influence the tech scene?
That's a great question. Culture influences how people think, behave, and interact, right? And it definitely has an impact on tech in Africa.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, one thing that jumps out is that strong sense of community you see in many African cultures. People are used to working together and helping each other out. And that's led to a really collaborative tech scene.
So it's less about like cutthroat competition and more about working together to build something bigger.
Exactly. There's a real sense of shared purpose. And that's valuable in a field that's all about innovation and collaboration.
Another thing I've noticed about African culture is the importance of storytelling. Stories are a powerful way to connect with people and get your message across. And we're seeing that in the way African tech companies are marketing themselves.
Yeah, a lot of them are using storytelling to connect with customers on an emotional level. They're not just selling products, they're selling a vision of a better future for Africa.
And that resonates with people. It's authentic, it's inspiring, and it's like rooted in African culture.
Exactly, and I think that's key to success. If you want to build a successful tech company in Africa, you need to understand the culture and connect with people on their level.
So it's not about just bringing in ideas and technology from the West. It's about making them fit the local context.
Absolutely. It's about finding that balance between, global trends and local needs.
And that's what makes the African tech scene so unique and exciting. It's a mix of global and local, traditional and modern. It's a place where innovation is happening, where cultures intersect.
And it's a place where anything feels possible. The future is being written right now, and Africa is playing a big part.
Well said. This has been a great conversation. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about the potential for technology to make inequality worse. What are some of the things we should be watching out for?
Well, one of the biggest ones is that digital divide we talked about. Access to the internet is still limited in many parts of Africa, and that means people who are already marginalized, those living in poverty in rural areas, those with disabilities, they're at risk of getting left behind.
So it's not enough to just provide access. It's about making sure everyone has the skills and resources to use technology effectively.
Exactly. We need to make sure technology empowers people, not leaves them further behind.
Another challenge is the potential for jobs to disappear. As automation becomes more common, there's a risk that jobs will be lost. And that could be devastating for African economies.
That's a valid concern, but I think it's important to remember that technology creates jobs too. And if we can equip people with the right skills, they'll be ready for those new opportunities.
So it's about seeing those changes coming and preparing people for what the future of work will look like.
Exactly. And it's about making sure the benefits of technology are shared broadly, not just concentrated among a few.
It's about creating a future where technology is used to build a more just and equitable world. That's a huge challenge, but also a massive opportunity, right? If we can get this right, tech could totally change Africa for the better.
No doubt. And it's not just about tackling the tough stuff. It's also about recognizing all the amazing innovation that's already happening all over the continent.
You know, we've been talking about foreign investment, but I'm kind of curious about homegrown innovation.
Yeah.
What are some African tech companies that are out there making a real difference?
Oh, there are tons. One that comes to mind is M-Pesa, that mobile money platform. It started in Kenya and revolutionized financial inclusion across Africa.
Right, M-Pesa.
Yeah, it's given millions of people who were shut out of the traditional banking system access to, basic financial services, sending and receiving money, paying bills, saving.
It's a perfect example of using tech to solve real problems and empower people. And it shows that innovation doesn't always come from, Silicon Valley.
Exactly. Another exciting area is using drones in healthcare. Companies like Zipline, they're using drones to deliver medical supplies to remote places in Rwanda, Ghana, places where infrastructure is a challenge. They're literally saving lives.
Wow, that's incredible. It's like tech bridging those gaps and giving people access to those essential services.
And then there's agritech. Companies like FarmCrowdy in Nigeria, they're using tech to connect farmers with investors and help them get their products to market. It's boosting agricultural productivity and helping people make a living.
These are just a few examples, right? There's so much ingenuity and entrepreneurial spirit in Africa. It really feels like a tech revolution is brewing.
I totally agree. And it's not just about the economics. It's about using technology to create a better future for Africa and for the world.
It's about harnessing the power of tech to tackle those global issues like climate change, poverty, and inequality.
Exactly. And making sure that the benefits of technology are shared, that everyone benefits.
So what can our listeners do to support this? How can they get involved and contribute to this tech-driven future for Africa?
Well, first off, stay informed. Read articles, listen to podcasts, follow African tech leaders on social media, learn about the challenges and opportunities in Africa.
And don't just be a passive observer, right? Engage with the content, ask questions, share your thoughts, help those African innovators and entrepreneurs get their voices heard.
If you can, consider investing in African tech companies. More and more venture capital firms and angel investors are focusing on supporting African startups.
And if you're an entrepreneur yourself, think about how you can use your skills and resources to contribute to the African tech scene. There are tons of opportunities for collaboration.
It's about building bridges, connecting people, sharing knowledge and resources. It's about working together to create a future that's more inclusive and sustainable.
As we've been talking, it's really hit me how much the future of Africa is tied to the future of technology.
It's a two-way street. Africa needs tech to overcome those developmental hurdles, and the world needs Africa's young energy and fresh thinking to shape how tech evolves.
It feels like we're at this crucial point, like the choices we make now will have a ripple effect for, years to come. It's exciting and, I gotta say, a little scary too, right?
It is, but I think it's important to approach it with a sense of optimism. We have a chance to create a future where technology is used to make things better for everyone, not just to replace people.
I love that. We have the power to shape the future, and that's what makes this whole conversation so important. We need to be having these discussions, getting the word out, and inspiring action.
Absolutely. And it's so important to include African voices in these conversations. They're the ones living it, and they have the insights and experiences we can learn from.
So true. We need to move past this Western-centric view of technology and see the incredible innovation that's happening throughout Africa.
There are so many inspiring stories of African entrepreneurs using technology to fix local problems, create jobs, build a better future.
Like that mobile money revolution, right? Transforming financial inclusion across the continent. Or using drones to get medical supplies to those remote areas.
Just a couple of examples. It's all about the incredible ingenuity and resilience we're seeing in Africa. And it's a reminder that the future of technology isn't going to be written just in Silicon Valley.
It's going to be a global story, with Africa playing a leading role.
And a story of collaboration, not competition. We need to break down those walls between developed and developing countries, between big tech companies and local startups, between different industries and fields.
Because those challenges we're up against, climate change, poverty, inequality, they're global problems. We need solutions that work for everyone.
It's about using technology to empower people, connect communities, bridge divides, and build a world that's more sustainable and inclusive.
I love that vision. And I believe we can make it happen. But it means stepping outside our comfort zones, challenging our assumptions, and being open to new ways of thinking and working.
It's about seeing Africa as a partner in innovation, not just a recipient of aid.
And recognizing the power of human potential, no matter where it comes from.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a call to action. Don't just watch this technological revolution happen, be a part of it.
Learn, explore, connect, and contribute. The future is being written right now, and we all have a role to play.
And who knows, maybe you'll be one of the next generation of African tech leaders shaping the world.
Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to subscribe to AfroTake and keep diving deep.